Hello, my name is Linda Kamphorst. I'm the Director of Family Support here at the Down Syndrome Association. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn October series. We are joined with Conquer Therapy, Danielle Schneck, the co-owner of Conquer Therapy. And this is actually the first session of our three-part series. So this session will focus on birth to 5.
Thank you so much for having me today, and thank you all for joining. I am one of the co-owners of Conquer Therapy Services. My background is actually that of an occupational therapist. So my business owner and I are both OTs by trade, and now we primarily kind of run our business of PT, OT, and speech therapist out of Creve Coeur. And we have been lucky enough to partner with several different projects with the DSA over the last year and a half, almost 2 years. Primarily, it's been a lot with the young adult population. We do some like connection groups and social skills groups and things like that, which is my business owner's like passion area. That's like her area of expertise. And then I'm the complete opposite, and I always work with the littles. So we balance each other well in that. So I was really excited to have the chance to come and talk to you all about this like birth to 5 population. Today's agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of run through the big areas of development you think about when you're thinking of your kiddo. So gross motor, fine motor, early self-care skills. We'll talk a little bit about sensory and then communication, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. And I'll talk specifically about each kind of area as far as it pertains to therapy as well. Okay. So I won't spend a ton of time on these next few slides, but I just kind of wanted to talk in general about kind of the therapy process. So some of you have maybe already experienced it. You already have your kiddo in physical, occupational, or speech therapy, or maybe all of them. So you kind of understand the way it works. A lot of times, though, whenever we get referrals for kids that are maybe just out of the hospital, they've been born, now they're kind of working that next step into kind of getting supports put into place at home. Oftentimes, we will start with either occupational or speech therapy, or occupational or physical therapy with our littles with Down syndrome, just because those are kind of the primary areas when parents are looking when they have little babies to kind of get started with. So usually we'll start with an evaluation that kind of looks over your child's current skills, their muscle tone, joint stability, all of those things that we kind of look at, particularly when we're looking at kids with Down syndrome, when we're trying to get a kind of baseline of where they are from a gross motor standpoint. And then we'll work with the family to kind of say, like, what are your priorities? What are your biggest concerns or biggest areas you really want to work with this therapist? So that way we can, keep your child making forward progress, but also make sure we're catering to whatever your primary goals are. So a lot of times in that, we'll start with a lot of strengthening exercises and a lot of things that will target core. So when we get a referral for a kiddo that has Down syndrome, we will look at their neck strength. We're going to look at their core strength. We're going to look at joint mobility, all those things to kind of see where they are at a baseline. So we know how to make a program that's going to help them over time get stronger so that they can be as functional as they can in their day-to-day activities. The next couple things to do then after we do that, we get that baseline, we're going to look at motor skill development. So if you kind of think of motor skills from, when babies are first born all the way through age 5, they kind of start with really nothing gross motor wise, right? So we're doing a lot of holding and support, but then we'll start working on things like neck strength. We'll work on things like rolling, tummy time, army crawling, getting up on all fours. And then we kind of progress from there into like sitting activities, crawling, walking, jumping, and we kind of keep our way working through that progress. And we'll kind of just meet your kiddo where they are and really kind of work. Sometimes we have to work backwards a little bit to correct some bad habits that kids form if they come to us later. But usually a lot of times doctors do a really great job of getting kids into us sooner than later, so we can try to get that forward movement from right out the gate. So the other thing that we look at is functional movement. Oftentimes, this is where physical and occupational therapy will kind of collide, and we will kind of talk through and work together on areas. OT might do an assessment and say, hey, we noticed that this individual is really struggling with balance during some of their like activities of daily living. We really want to try to work in on some better activities to work on balance training or core strength, or things that we might think they are still having some underlying issues with that PT could work with them. And we'll kind of make a plan to kind of get some activities in place for that. And then a lot of times, if you're already doing maybe first steps therapy or you're going to an outpatient setting, you notice with littles, we try to trick them as much as we can as far as like work goes. So we'll try to do a lot of play-based approaches with them to try in traditional therapy to incorporate work into play. So that way they're much more motivated to do it. And we can kind of sneak in our kind of techniques and strategies as we get in there. And then truly the most important part of what we do, especially with our birth to 3, is getting parents involved or whoever is with that kiddo the most during the day. We really want to educate them, because my biggest thing I'll tell parents from the day we meet is them coming to see me once or twice a week for therapy is not going to change the trajectory of their life. I need to teach you to be me whenever I'm not there. So we, especially at our practice, whenever my business partner and I still take all the phone calls for our new clients, we let families know, like, we are an interactive group. Like, we want you in our visits. We do not want you in our waiting room. We really want you to learn and be a part of this. So that way you can work this out at home as well, and really feel well supported and well educated to take care of your child as far as their development goes. And then finally, we also do a lot of monitoring. So whenever you come for therapy, you'll see, like, you'll have your initial assessment, but then periodically through that, we also take some data to make sure that we're making progress. We want to make sure that not only can we functionally see progress, we want to really make sure we're not missing anything. So we kind of go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. We address goals. We might meet goals or need to modify goals or add new goals, but we want to keep that plan moving, so that way your kiddo is getting the most use of their time with us. And then the next thing I want to pause with physical therapy that I was so excited to get to talk to some parents about, specifically parents of children with Down syndrome, is something called dynamic movement intervention. We have 2 PTs at our office that it's been almost a year and a half ago, the first one started. We kind of came across this approach. We'd followed different clinics on the coast. So what people were doing in California, what people were doing in New York, what people are doing in Florida. And the Midwest tends to be a little behind in some of the up and coming therapy things. And this was one that I did a lot of research on and found it really, everything I saw and watched and read made sense to bring to our office. So what dynamic movement intervention is an internationally recognized manual therapy technique designed to help kids achieve their gross motor milestones. Unlike traditional methods of therapy, it really, really leverages the brain's neuroplasticity to facilitate rapid, long-lasting changes, enabling kids to acquire new skills. So oftentimes our therapists will see these kids in our office more often, but the actual exercises that are created with this program are designed to really work with the brain's neuroplasticity. And our brains, from 0 to like 7, that is when you're going to get that opportunity for most change. So the earlier we can kind of get to families and educate them on this, the better the outcomes are going to be for their kiddos as far as achieving some of these gross motor milestones. So how is it different? So DMI is different from traditional therapy methods in a variety of ways. It's able to provoke a higher level of gross motor independence through these exercises that challenge the kids to complete functional tasks. So if you follow us, or if you're not following us on social media, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Primarily our feed is our therapist doing DMI, because we are trying really hard to spread the word and educate people on this technique, because we are seeing just unbelievable progress, not only with kids with Down syndrome, but kids with cerebral palsy, general developmental, like just global delays. But I specifically, with our involvement with DSA, was like, oh my goodness, if we could educate our littles, get this information out to parents 0 to 5 and really try to work in some of these techniques and strategies, could we decrease some of these gross motor delays that we consistently see in our friends with Down syndrome, and try to kind of get some more explosive progress. So if that's something that we can talk more about this at the end. If anyone has questions about it, we can definitely talk one-on-one. We can connect you to our therapy team if you have questions, but it's really a really great program, and we're seeing really, really good results with all the kids that are coming in for it. And it can benefit. So really, any child experiencing a gross motor delay can benefit from DMI. Like I talked about, includes a wide variety of diagnoses. But traditionally, like if you have a kiddo that does have like low muscle tone or high muscle tone, or they're struggling with like motor planning and things like that, this is definitely a really, really good option, because you have this really strong connection to that neuroplastic change within the developing brain. And it can really set those kind of neurons to connect from the get-go the way they need to be. So here's some signs of gross motor delay. We just kind of have this little chart. If your kiddo, is under 1 and they're struggling with head control, they're struggling with rolling, tummy time, transitioning in and out of sitting, things like that. Those are all things we look at in our littles. And then as they get older and they start to crawl or walk, we'll look at things like they're struggling with balance. Maybe they're falling more than they should. Are they, having more fatigue than they should, especially our friends that also have heart conditions on top of Down syndrome. We really try to make sure we're considering a program that addresses all medical complications that might be kind of slowing them down from a gross motor standpoint. Okay, so some fun stuff that we do. Ways, I know one of the objectives we wanted to kind of talk about today was ways to support gross motor development for your kiddos at home. So these are fun things that we'll do at our therapy office, as well as when we see kids in the community. So one thing that, if you're not doing already, if you have a kiddo that is starting to kind of move, just setting up obstacle courses, that's probably one of our favorite things to do. And you can do that with couch cushions or beanbag chairs, or just even creating like a little balance beam at home, and or a tunnel that you can have them work on crawling and working on that weight bearing through their arms and shoulders. We'll do a lot of that. We incorporate a lot through like music. There's music going a lot at our office. We also have kid yoga that we like to do. We'll find anything we can do pretty much my go-to, I always say when I would see kids out in the community, is if I have balls, bubbles, and balloons, I can pretty much entertain a kid for an hour. So you just got to be creative with what you're doing and how you're doing it whenever you're trying to really target. We'll do a lot of activities, like animal walking is really fun for them. We'll set activities on vertical surfaces to kind of work on some of that like tummy muscle and neck muscle and shoulder strength, because it's a lot harder and more challenging for them to do things at a vertical surface, but we can attack a lot of skills when doing that. Okay, so our next two sections are going to kind of hone in more on OT and what we address when we're working with the littles. So we'll kind of talk through fine motor skills, and then we'll talk through early self-care skills as well in these first two sections. So oftentimes children with Down syndrome may experience fine motor delays due to several interconnected factors. So just in general, having lower muscle tone, joint laxity, delayed motor planning and coordination. Sometimes there's visual motor struggles we have to think about, and then also having delayed skilled acquisition. So a lot of times, and we'll talk through this with speech too, skills will go hand in hand. So when kids are working really, really, really hard on gross motor skills, like just maintaining an upright position, is really hard to then add in a task on top of that. So as OTs, we'll oftentimes look and be like, okay, where do we need to give them support at their trunk, so that way they can functionally engage, because a lot of this has to learn simultaneously. So we'll work on positioning that supports that kiddo so they can participate in age-appropriate play that they're interested in. while also starting to work away and pull away supports as they get stronger. So we don't want it to be a long-term thing unless it's absolutely necessary. We want to continue to pull away any supports that we're using so that way we can build on that strength piece while we're working through fine motor skills. As you start to kind of pay attention to fine motor with your kids when they're little, some things that we'll look at is, are they able to use both of their hands at the same time, like hold two toys in their hands at the same time? Are they able to bring those toys together at midline and bang them? Or are we holding a toy with one hand and then we give them another and they drop it? That's usually a quick sign. When they're sitting, are they able to reach across midline to access something they want? Or are they always just kind of keeping their hands, right on right, left on left, and not really crossing that midline? Or if they are doing it, they're not doing it efficiently. We oftentimes too, with kids with fine motor delays, we'll see a limited interest. So we might have them come in and we'll have a whole bunch of different activities out, and they will do it for a tiny little bit, and then they want to move on to things that are easier for them to do. So we'll look for signs of avoidance, or we'll look for signs of like struggles with holding like writing utensils or eating utensils, or if they're struggling within games that we're playing, we'll kind of keep an eye out for that and find ways to help them. There's endless ways as an OT to support fine motor development. A lot of times you're just doing it naturally and you don't really know, but when your child is struggling with fine motor, we want to make sure that we're doing things in a way that's actually going to strengthen the areas that they're having weaknesses in. So a lot of times when kids are young, we will do things through just like play. We'll do things through positioning. Like I said, if we're down on the floor with them playing, we'll do stuff with books and balls and age appropriate toys. And then as they get to those toddler preschool years, we'll incorporate more floor and table activities, and we'll offer things like Play-Doh, which is one of my favorite things to do for strengthening the tiny hands and the muscles, or kinetic stand or putty. And we make games out of that. We'll hide things in it. We'll roll it. We'll have all the cookie cutters out. Working on teaching age appropriate grasp of whether it's a writing utensil or an actual utensil for eating. We'll work on strategies to support that. And then while doing that, again, I always tell parents, I look from, we call it like proximal to distal success. So I will see a kid, if I see a kid really struggling distally with their hands, they're really struggling with, some age appropriate play at the table, doing things like simple puzzles or Legos or stringing beads, I go all the way back up to the shoulder, the neck, and the core. So oftentimes if kids are struggling with things with their hands, it's because they have some sort of proximal weakness that we need to go backwards and address. So we can do some of that through our activities that we do. We may suggest, even if it's really significant, that they go back if they haven't had PT for a while for those areas. We might have PT get involved for a brief period of time to give us some more suggestions, things like that. But it's definitely something we look at when we're doing that. And again, I do a lot of activities at a vertical surface. So if you're familiar with squigs, we have a lot of like little mirrors and glass in our office. So we'll have kids oftentimes do things with squigs where they'll be reaching, we'll help work on sidestepping to get to a squig, and they have to pull it off and then move it and put it back in a bucket. So there's a lot of movement, crossing of midline, trunk rotation that we incorporate into our fine motor play. That's really helpful for building skills. Same with stickers. So I'll put stickers all over the place, all over the room. I'll put them, I'll even have them start putting them on their body. So I'll say, we'll put a sticker on our foot and work on crossing the right hand has the sticker. We're going to put it on our left toe. So we're addressing some gross motor skills, but we're also really working on a lot of fine motor as well in those activities. All right. And then this section, so early self-care skills, a lot of times for many, many years, I worked in the birth to 3 population. And, a lot of those years, a lot of times parents are just surviving. They may have more than one kid at home and you're tired, you are overworked and underappreciated most days. But I will talk, when kids are hitting that like 2-year-old wanting to try to do things, or they're getting close to 3 and they want to do everything on their own that they can, but they're not successful. I talk a lot to parents about how I as an OT will look at your kid now as a 2-year-old, but I also am already forward thinking 10 years out. Like, I want to make sure that whatever we're working on at age 2 is going to set them up to be the most independent person they can be with their abilities at age 12. So I'm constantly trying to think ahead, to make sure that we're working, because repetition and exposure and practice are what is going to make your child independent as they kind of work through these early self-care skills. So we'll talk through a little bit of what that looks like. Modeling behavior. I mean, I am a mom of 3 currently, with my 4th on the way, and I feel like there's always someone afoot trying to talk to me or be a part of what I'm doing, and just continue to example for them. So if you're working on maybe dressing with your child, instead of doing 100% of that for them, if they are interested and capable, work on pulling back 10% every time. So maybe you're gonna, work on putting their pants on or pulling their pants off. See how far they can get in doing it with you modeling with them, and then help them in the areas they get stuck in. Or you might want to start with just them putting a leg in, and then you do the other leg, and then we'll work on pulling up, things like that. One of the other strategies we use a lot when we're teaching early self-care skills for kids is visual aids and task breakdown. So as an OT, I always joke, I can take something like, I'll say, put on your pants. And to most people, that is a one-step activity. We're putting on our pants. But I can take that activity and we can break that down into probably 5 different steps. That's going to give your kid a better understanding of what that means. So, first we're going to sit, and then we're going to put in right leg and left leg. And then we got to wiggle our pants up. And then we got to stand up and pull them over our bottoms and get them on, through our waist. So giving verbal prompts to break a task down, but then also OTs and speech therapists oftentimes will use visual aids to help break down a task that they maybe are struggling with, or one that they're getting closer to independence with, but they might just need some pictures. Like teeth brushing is a really good example. Having a routine in the bathroom that breaks down each step of that is really helpful for a kid. So not only are they hearing your voice in the beginning, they're also seeing it as a visual reminder as well. And then the last thing on this slide is, obviously, we all know kids love encouragement. They love positive reinforcement. So the more we can give of that, the more they're going to be enticed to do it. Especially 0 through 5. My goodness, they thrive on as much positive praise as we can give them. So no matter how small the celebration, remembering to try to acknowledge that when we can. This next slide is just going to talk through making it fun. I usually will say, if you're going to try a new skill, don't do it when you're trying to rush out the door to get to, work or school or a sibling's activity or their own activity. Try to do some of these things that are harder in the middle of the day. If you have a day at home where you don't have to have your PJs off till 11 in the morning, make that a day where you're going to practice getting ready for the day, or find a time if you're working on meal times. Pick one meal or one snack a day where you're going to have time to work on utensil use or cup drinking, or incorporating them into meal time. So even meal prep. I just had a visit yesterday with a family, and we talked through some of the importance of including our kids in meal prep and not overthinking it. It can be as simple as them helping to spread peanut butter or jelly on a piece of bread, or spreading, pizza sauce on a pre-made pizza crust, or sprinkling cheese on there. Just having them be a part of that and learning multi-step directions is really, really fun for them. And it's a really, really important skill to teach problem solving and understanding different routines that normally mom and dad are just kind of taking over and running and doing. And they'll feel empowered and they'll feel a part of it. And the more we can see them feel that, the more they're going to want to do it and be a part of that routine. And then obviously encourage decision making, usually around anywhere between 2 and 4, 4.5. Our kids start to want to have an opinion. They want to be a part of choices, or they want to try to do things on their own. So we can't give them a choice in everything. Some things just are what they are. But if there is an option of, you want to wear a yellow shirt or a red shirt today, giving it when we can, so that way they can start to develop some autonomy, and they can also develop some choice making skills, so they feel like they aren't just being told all day long what to do, that they feel a part of their day as well. Being patient and supportive. I still, with my own kids, I'm like, oh gosh, I've got to remember to slow down. I was trying to help one of my kids yesterday with a book report, and I was like, oh, I know he does not know this. But it was just meaning to stop what I was doing with work and stop what I was doing with other things to really sit down and be patient and show him and teach him. So finding time to teach them things that they don't know and that they need to learn, and recognizing that they may need to be taught in a slower pace, in a calm way that's going to allow them to retain what we're trying to teach them. Peer learning. I know DSA offers some really great supports for families, and for peer involvement. So getting involved in those whenever you can. Kids learn from each other. They want to be around other kids. They want to model what they see. So getting out to parks or libraries, if they're in preschool, that's a great opportunity, or daycare. Being around family settings is always really important, just so they have those opportunities to engage and participate and learn, social cues that they don't necessarily get when they're just home with a caretaker, or, mom and dad and siblings. Okay, so this last section in OT, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over, because, gosh, so many of these we can give an hour presentation within themselves. But I did want to mention sensory integration, because it's a call for OT that we get often, probably almost daily. I would say at this point we have somebody calling, and they're not saying, I think my child has sensory processing difficulties. They're calling saying, my child is really struggling with big feelings. My child's really struggling with transitioning with routines. They give kind of some backstory that we know as OTs, like, yep, they're definitely, they're not feeling their best self right now with the way that their brain and nervous system are kind of processing, and they're not working together well to kind of feel balanced. So sensory processing as a whole refers to our body's way to process information. So it's how we perceive, manage, and organizing incoming information. So if you kind of think about your day, if our sensory system is working well, we are able to kind of manage all the visual input that's coming in, the auditory input that's coming in, but then also our body's need for touch, our body's need for movement, things like that. And a lot of times we can just fill that need. We just know innately almost what our body needs in order for us to meet what we call our daily quota. So when I have a parent calling and, they're asking about sensory things, what I will tell them is that as humans, we all have sensory needs. We all have a quota at the end of the day that our body needs to feel regulated and feel good and achieve something we call homeostasis. So we don't want to be living like way up here and really high and going nonstop, or really, really low and kind of avoidant of things. We want to kind of find that middle ground. And the way that our brain and nervous system work, I always say it's like traffic on a superhighway. So you just have things coming at you left and right and left and right, and we can find a way to pivot and get to where we need to be. But if a child or an individual is struggling to process that information and they aren't able to self-regulate, they need co-regulation, which honestly, 0 through 10, almost most of those kids, usually around age 8, we'll start to see kids able to self-regulate a little better. But a lot of times our 0 to 5 kids, they need co-regulation. They need some sensory plans in place. They need some supports whenever they are not just naturally finding ways that their body can process information coming in and out. So this just talks through some sensory system developmental milestones that we kind of see and we kind of look at as a checklist essentially for our, like, I think that one was 0 to 3. But some signs of sensory integration struggles, I would say, would be if your child is kind of at one extreme or the other, and it's impacting their daily routines or their ability to, be in a variety of environments. If they are doing well and they're regulating in a way that does not hurt themselves or anyone around them, I usually say we're good. They're participating in daily routines. They're finding ways that are socially appropriate and safe to meet their sensory needs. We're okay. But if we're having parents call and saying that these sorts of concerns are starting to interfere with multiple daily routines, multiple times a day, oftentimes you need an OT to kind of step in and help. So if you have a kiddo that's really avoidant or seeking out a lot of tactile input, which is like touch. Typically, when we talk about tactile, it's more like, are they tolerating touching a variety of textures like sticky or wet or hot or cold, or the grass or dirt? Are we handling that okay, or are we struggling? Or are we overreactive to noise? It really bothers them, or are we really underreactive? We don't even seem to notice noises. We are just kind of living in this other area. Are they struggling with focusing on tasks? Are we having a lot of repetitive or frequent moving patterns? If you have a kiddo that's really struggling with sleep or eating or resistant to like grooming practices, we want to know. So if you're having those struggles at home, please reach out, whether it's to one of our OTs, or if you're in First Steps and you have a therapist or a place you're going, definitely let your OT know, or let your pediatrician know if you're not getting OT at all. And they can easily make a referral. You can call and say, I want to go to this place and get OT. And that is your right as a parent to do that, to go to the pediatrician and say, I really think my kiddo needs some OT. Can we get that referral started? Some ways to support sensory development, just general ways, because we really, really do try to make this very individualized for kids when we see them. But we try to focus on fun during any type of sensory activity that we're doing. We don't add pressure or shame to any sensory reaction. We try to just be very neutral. So whether their reaction is really over the top or very unpleasant, we just try to come at it at a place of listening and acknowledging where they are, and kind of meeting them there and working gradually towards getting back to that kind of middle ground that we talked about in the previous slide. Okay, so we're gonna, just so we have time for Q&A here, I'm gonna kind of get through this next area of speech and language. We have some terrific speech therapists. Whenever I am struggling with a kiddo during this kind of age group with communication, they always have ways that I can kind of go to them, and they have some ideas on some things we can incorporate into our sessions. So early intervention for speech and language for kiddos with Down syndrome is so important. Oftentimes, you'll hear the phrase like late walker often leads to a late talker, and that can sometimes, with different populations, that can be the case, sometimes not. But what I've seen is, in doing this now for as many years as I have, it oftentimes does correlate. When kids, as humans, our body is going to need to do like its autonomic things, like breathe and digest food and maintain an upright posture before they do anything else. Like, we are going to do our things that our body has to do to survive and be okay before we kind of access any other skills. So when we have kids that are working really, really hard on gross motor skills, and we see a delay in meeting those skills because of a variety of reasons, oftentimes it's really hard to then also work simultaneously on these big communication skills that often need to come. So usually what I'll see when I work with kids with Down syndrome is we make these guides towards, or these gains towards gross motor skills and fine motor skills. And then we start to see these bursts of language come through because they've mastered something like sitting. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like they started sitting and now we're babbling more, and they're starting to say maybe like mama or dada, or they're imitating, that receptive language is starting to shine through, or we can tell like they're understanding more. than what we're saying. And then another big gross motor leap happens, like they're now crawling or they're starting to pull to stand, and we see kind of almost a regression in communication happen, or just a plateau. And parents are like, oh gosh, we were making such gains. And we have to kind of look at the whole picture and be like, well, they're working really, really hard right now on this. And that's maybe why we're not seeing it so much. And then as soon as they master that gross motor skill, we may see another leap in communication. So just kind of, I always try to tell parents to be cognizant of that. But what it doesn't make it easier for is, and what we see is when kids are hitting like age 2 to 5, they have this huge amount of receptive language. You as parents especially know them more than anyone. They can understand so much more than they can actually verbally say sometimes. And that's a really hard place to be for a toddler or preschooler who also has a lot of emotional growth happening at the same time. So our speech and language therapists are really great about giving suggestions for bridging that gap until that expressive language starts to kind of correlate with the receptive again. So we see a decrease in, tantrums or frustration or refusal. So one of the reasons we usually try to tell parents, get in with speech as soon as you can and whenever it's appropriate, because those enhanced communication skills and working on them from the start are so, so important. If we're really struggling to not find words, there's so many different devices. We have a couple speech therapists and even one of our OTs who does a lot of our what we call AAC, which is like communication device evaluations for families that are interested in that. They've tried other options and they're like, we need something. We need a way to, let our child communicate in an easier way until we have words coming. So we have stuff as simple as like a PAX board, where it's just little pictures that we work on choice making, and a child can point or pull or pick, all the way up to like devices that are made just for them that have like buttons on them that the child can push and speak in sentences and things like that. And speech therapists are really great at helping families kind of target what those devices need to look like to meet the needs of that person individually. So that way we're using it to the best of their ability. So the last slide in this slide just kind of talk about all the reasons for getting speech and language started sooner. I think the previous one kind of talked through how communication is tied to improved cognitive development. Obviously, it's really helpful for social inclusion. We want our kids to be able to not only communicate with us, but then communicate with peers and teachers and people in the community, so we know that their voice is being heard and that they feel safe and their needs and wants are addressed, and they feel a part of the community they're in. It also, because of that, is going to build a ton of confidence. It's going to help their self-esteem tremendously, help them to be a part of, their family and feel really connected. So having our voice is a really big part of who we are as a person, and we want to make sure we're supporting the kids that we see the best we can, so they have that. Some signs of a speech and language delay. If you're noticing that your kid, like we talked about, they have, you are seeing as their parent, because moms and dads usually always know, and we know for all of our kids, we can understand a lot of the times, because we're with them all the time, what a grunt or a point or a gesture means, and they don't even have to say anything. We can just read we know what they want. We know the time of day, we can pull context. But if you are struggling with that, if you're like, gosh, I have no idea half the time what they want, or they're in school and the teacher's like, I have no idea what that means or what they want, making sure you're getting somebody to help them with that expressive piece. Sometimes we'll also see difficulties with following more than one-step directions, which can be kind of a twofold thing. Like they're struggling to understand more than one thing at a time, which falls into that receptive tone or that receptive category. Sometimes then too, we'll see limited vocabulary. So they may gain a handful of words, but then we don't really move past single word utterances. They might just stay there. So we want to make sure we're building into single words to 2 and 3 words to sentences and paragraphs. So that way we can be functioning in our communication the best we can. And again, I said, like our speech and language therapists, they have so many fun ways to incorporate speech and language into our daily routines. And that's one of the biggest takeaways in working with many of them that I hear them say is have a language rich environment. Surround your child with your voice, like whether it's through music or book reading or just talking through what you're doing in the day, turning off background noise like the TV or a tablet that's going to pull them away from that language rich environment is so, so important. Also making sure that what we're saying to them isn't hugely, if we're trying to just give them a clear direction, making sure we're not saying too many words in that as well is really, really helpful. Book reading, gosh, there's so much literature and research on that. Reading to your child, whether it's even just making it up for the first few years, just having pictures and talking through them. Some of my favorite books that I'll tell parents is if you can make a book or social story about your own family or places you go, kids can really relate to that, and to see them be able to interact with that and understand that is really, really fun as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to go ahead and say thank you very much for your
Yeah.
presentation, Danielle. And as you mentioned, we absolutely love collaborating with you and Conquer Therapy for all the groups that you do with us. So thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you.